How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. A very special Strength Chat episode because I've got two guests for you today. Today, I'm joined by an IPF World Champion and a Strength Chat veteran of three previous episodes. A dream team, some may say. Today, I'm joined by Jess Buettner and Eric Helms. How are you both doing?
I'm doing good today. Just got back from Texas yesterday, so I got a 1 day off and then back to work tomorrow.
All right. Did you enjoy your day off?
It's been good so far. I mean, it's 2 p.m., so I still got a lot to do, but we're doing good today.
Nice. And Eric, how are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah. I got to see picture updates from Omar while he was out in Texas with Jess. So I felt like I was there, which is probably more of a testament to just how lonely I am in my life. But no, in all seriousness, I'm real good. It's just starting the day on Tuesday for me here at 8 a.m. So we're all on crazy different time zones between Canada, the UK, and New Zealand. But no, I'm well, man.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I like it. It took some setting up, but glad we were to get the episode in. And how are you both feeling after Sheffield? I know obviously it's been a couple of weeks now, but how are you both feeling? Has it kind of like settled down now, or straight into the next prep? How have you both been getting on since then? What's been happening in your worlds?
For me, it was such a long lead up, like a big stressful lead up to Sheffield because I had Canadian nationals 5 weeks before, and then Sheffield was so intense. I thought I'd be burnt out, but I'm actually feeling pretty motivated, almost too motivated because I got straight back in the gym and I tweaked my back a little bit, but now I'm feeling good once I worked some of that out. So, yeah, I don't know about Eric, but I'm actually feeling pretty good.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I feel I'm very excited. So no, Sheffield was. Were you there? Did you
Yeah,
did
yeah.
you? Yeah. So you know what Sheffield was like for being there in person. It was wild. Um, Nothing like that has been done in powerlifting, at least not in a pure event for powerlifting. You have to find the likes of the Arnold or something like that to get that kind of crowds. And even then, I don't think it compares. So um, it was just incredible to see more than three-quarters of the women break world records in that division. Just how much that the women's side of powerlifting is becoming competitive. To see Jesus do his thing and to be a part of it. So um, I think what is really exciting is just thinking about how much of a dogfight it's going to be at Worlds in Jess's division, but honestly, most of the divisions now. And I know Jess appreciates a head-to-head battle. Um, I appreciate it as well, but I'd also it's of course stressful and exciting. So all the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I was a little nervous when Jess tweaked her back. Like we sat down, we created like I think it was an 11-week plan at the time, and then within a couple of weeks, she's like, I'm like, oh no, but then she was good to go because she's very resilient, and I'm excited. So I think it's going to be a really really cool world, and it's the first time I've been to a worlds that has such an awesome destination of being in Malta. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Ah, nice. And with that, because obviously we've touched on Sheffield there about the experiences, but how sort of has your relationship as coach and athlete developed, over time in terms of, building up to, a competition like Sheffield, Worlds coming up as well. How kind of you two work together in terms of the programming, what's worked so well, tweaks, changes, over the time that you've worked together.
Well, actually, in 2020, um, I had mildly injured a disc in my back when COVID and all the lockdowns started. So I just thought, okay, powerlifting won't be on for a while. I'm gonna do some bodybuilding training that's hopefully easier on my spine. So that's when I reached out to Eric. Well, actually, Omar suggested him to me, and I knew who Eric was because we actually, when I was in university on the track and field team, we actually studied um, the muscle and strength pyramids for a few classroom sessions and stuff like that. So, yeah, which is really cool to come full circle like that. So, I was super excited to work with Eric for that. And then it kind of just, I found out I didn't really like bodybuilding training that much. So when my injury was healed, I just said, okay, let's switch back to powerlifting. And from there, that was my first, that was the first open world championship that Eric and I went into that I won gold in. So we've just been building on that ever since.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's been a cool experience on my end as well. Omar was the matchmaker. Matchmaker made us a match, and kind of basically sold me. I guess sold Jess on the fact that I was like a bodybuilding coach, and the experience I had was one that was good, but Jess did try to ruin the relationship by claiming that bodybuilding training is too easy. So I was on the brink. I almost fired her at that point just for that statement. No, but I think one cool thing you're asking about what's changed, what's worked, and I think as it should, the rapport between an athlete and a coach should change over time. My philosophy of coaching is very much one where I'm here to support the athlete. The athlete has their goals. They have what they want to do. They've come to me, and it's my job to see how I can help them. I'm not authoritarian. I'm not, a dictator. The most authoritarian I've ever been was trying to get Jess not to take the stairs at Sheffield, and she almost like drop kicked me for that anyway. So, so the relationship has been kind of like, all right, so what do you need from me? How can I help? And it started off with, hey, like basically here's some guidance, and I want you to write me some bodybuilding training. And then once we shift to powerlifting, it was more like, hey, can I consult with you to get your thoughts on the powerlifting training? And then now it's shifted to becoming more collaborative, which I think is really, really cool. And I would say, and Jess, of course, feel free to, if you think I'm not characterizing anything right, feel free to chime in. But I think for a while, most of my input was just kind of, oh, you've thought about this structural where we move things around, but we kept the general approach, but there was kind of a trend in decreasing volume overall, like total number of sets. And we did try some things that we were like, that doesn't seem to be paying off very well, like incorporating more singles, which seemed to work pretty well on most of the lifts, but not the deadlifts, which we found is just a little too fatiguing, a little too risky, not kind of worth the payoff, at least at the kind of loads or RPs we were talking about. But for the most part, there was this trend downward in volume. And then we kind of found a nice spot where recovery, risk of injury was lower, still getting the same output. Obviously, she won 2 world titles and has been improving her own numbers, which I think is probably the most important thing. And then now moving into worlds, we've started to kind of bring those volumes back up, which is something from my perspective as a coach, it's a lever I know we can pull because she's done higher volumes. And right now I know that all the other levers, messing with exercise selection, messing with frequency, experimenting with higher loads, singles, all that stuff, we pulled a lot. So now I'm thinking, let's just try doing a little more of all this because we're going to be into a very competitive battle. She can handle it, and let's see if we can get a little more out of her. And she does tend to peak pretty well once we pull back. So that's kind of been our game plan going into Worlds. And most of it has just been the accumulation of minor tweaks and observations over time, at least from my perspective. But Jess, I don't know if you have seen it or experienced it the same way.
Oh yeah, for sure. I definitely definitely like the collaborative approach, mostly because my lifestyle's a little chaotic. Like I work some crazy hours a lot of the time and like usually anywhere between 5 to 10 day stretches as a pharmacist. And sometimes the shifts are long and kind of unpredictable. It's not like a standard 9 to 5. The shifts are either usually 8 to 4 or 2 to 10, and then on the weekends like 9 to 9. So I've had trouble in past trying to get a coach that will be able to create flexible programming. So I think that's something that's worked really well with what Eric's done is instead of having like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and then kind of whatever else fits. And that's been really good because I just have to do what I can a lot of the time. And I've really appreciated that for sure.
Nice.
I really appreciated something else. So I've always been having type 1 diabetes. I've always been like, I've been tracking macros, not just carbohydrates, but everything else, like even in a little notebook since I was probably 14 or 15 years old. And I thought I really had a good handle on that. But what I was actually doing for my for cutting weight for competitions was just way too much. Like it was way too difficult. And having Eric there, who has like such a high level of expertise and experience and science-based knowledge in that front, has made all of those weight cuts so much easier. Like that first open world championship we did together, I had to lose 30 pounds of body weight because I had thought worlds weren't going to be on. So I just thought, oh, I'm going to try and see if I can weigh 200 pounds and see if I like my body. And at that point, and I wanted to try and do it as lean as possible. But I got pretty much to like 195 pounds. What would that be? Like 90, 92 kilos?
It
During
is 195 is like 89, I think.
89, yeah.
Yeah.
I should be better at that conversion. But yeah, and then so all of a sudden in 14 weeks, I had to lose 30 pounds because they announced the worlds were back on. And with Eric helping me with that, it was actually so easy. Like I did not feel the amount of fatigue and burnout that I normally would have had I done it myself. I just thought it was normal at that point. But that's been something, like having Eric on my side for that has been extremely beneficial.
Nice. And you've both kind of mentioned there, obviously working as a team, which I think is that's important as a coach and an athlete. Is the things, because obviously with Jess, your work schedule, obviously remote coaching and those sorts of things. How much time did it take to kind of refine those things? Was there anything where it was kind of like, I'm maybe disagree on this. This might not work right now. Or was it just a case of, because I think sometimes what can be a struggle for some people is not being open to trying some different things or learning different things. Or did you both kind of go into it with the thought of, right, what have we got? How can we just make this better and get to where we want to be? That kind of makes sense.
I got some things to say there. Actually, it was I really appreciate the credit that Jess is giving me for being flexible in the nutrition guidance I gave. But to be 100% honest, I was a little intimidated with this. She's my first athlete with type 1 diabetes that I've worked with. So I had a good chat with Steve Taylor, who is our registered dietitian at 3D Muscle Journey. And it was just like, and of course, most importantly, I had a good chat with Jess, and we talked about that. And I was very frank and open, like, hey, I've never worked with an athlete with type 1 diabetes. What's going on here? And she explained, the strengths and or the differences, positive and perceivably negative from that. Like, hey, I've been tracking macros forever. I have to do this. I'm on point. I was like, oh, that's a good point. Like, I didn't think about that. Like, you have to continuously monitor all this. So one thing I can say is that I make sense when you think about it, but I didn't necessarily know would be the case, is she's very autonomous, and she's extremely experienced, and she knows what she's doing, and she's very comfortable running her own nutrition because she has to, right? So that's really cool. And I see that as a big strength that she's built. And if you've ever been with her in competition, which I've now had the pleasure of doing, she has to manage an additional variable compared to everybody else, which is her blood glucose, and a lot more tightly. So anyway, one of the things that I did when I first started programming her nutrition was I was using a few more ranges. So I was trying to give her flexibility. So I said, hey, here's a minimum intake of protein, here's a preferred range, and here's like a max. And then I said, okay, here's like a minimum intake of dietary fat, here's a minimum intake of carbohydrate, and here's a energy intake range, about 200 calories for now, based upon a rate of weight loss that we're trying to get. And I also did some basic calculations of like energy availability, knowing that, hey, we've got to lose a lot of weight because we got this, oh shoot, like we're competing now, and there's a short time period, and like Jess said, we had to drop a fair amount of weight. Like, let's make sure you're still able to perform, but how fast can we go? And I think we had a comp lined up in the 84s, and then we were eventually trying to get to the 76s. And let me just say, another thing that made me really thankful is the change to the 76 kilo class. Obviously, if we had to do this sprint to 72, it would have been potentially a much harder story. But yeah, so once we got that very challenging initial goal of a lot of weight loss out of the way, then it became, something a little more straightforward. And I think we'd found kind of that way of working together. So on the nutrition, and that was that experience for me, a little intimidating, but then I saw it was actually an advantage. And, Jess is one of the most on point people I've worked with when it comes to, managing her weight cut and managing her weight loss before the acute, water loading, water cutting, fat carb exchange, and gut cut. That there's a lot of moving parts to the weight making process. And we went over it in detail the first time. And then we were in Sheffield, and I was like, so Jess, you good? And she was like, yeah, I'm fine. Like just doing it. I could tell where she was in the process, because she looked a little more pale and a little less happy, and brought up being an 84 in the future more often. But she wasn't like, like, coach, what do I do today? Like, she's on point, water loading, water cutting. She's been in the game long before I came to be an assistant. So it should be of no surprise. She's a pro.
Nice.
And with nutrition.
Yeah. And at Sheffield, am I right in thinking that was the first time that you'd both sort of like being at a competition together? What was,
yep.
Because obviously with something like that, it goes from, it's kind of like, oh yeah, first competition might be, whatever it may be, but then to go to like Sheffield, what was that like? Because obviously that would have been, I know obviously you've both worked together before, but that would have been a new experience for you both. So what was that from a coach's point of view, but then from your point of view, Jess, in terms of a competition like that to go to?
So
it was
coaches,
super.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, no, you go ahead.
Okay. It was super unique because the actual goal of the competition was quite different. You're not aiming for first, second, third place against people in your weight class. You're aiming to get the highest above the world record. So it was definitely a unique experience there, and I didn't know what to expect. It was awesome having Eric there, just because we had a lot of time a lot more time to talk about game plan when there's only one athlete that you're looking after as a coach. And we also had time to talk with the Team Canada coach, Garrett Bentley, and go over game plan there, which was awesome. And I actually, for Sheffield, the one thing that I found difficult was at the warm-up room and the coach's area. Like, this has nothing to do with Eric at all. It was just tough being in such a small holding spot where it was very echoey and all your other competitors are just right there. Like, normally I like to pace a little more. Yeah, it was kind of like I like to pace a little more and do like I don't know, I just always practice bracing into my belt really hard, but it was almost a little bit awkward trying to do that with so many people just right there. And then going all the way from the warm-up room took about 3 to 5 minutes to get up to like the holding area before you went out on the stage. So just actual things about the competition that were kind of difficult were definitely those two things.
Yeah. And what was it? I know, this is a little bit of a tangent, but from watching, because obviously being there live and then watching the clips afterwards, it was a little bit like, especially as the lifters were coming out, it was a little bit like watching like UFC fighters come out, or like the WWE. Looking back, I don't know whether you've seen any of the clips looking back, but at the time, obviously, I can imagine you were both really focused, including on what you're doing. But looking back, did it kind of have that feel to it, or did at one point? Because I was thinking, I was like, you'd think you want like your walk-on music if you were doing a US fight or anything. Did it feel like that looking back at it, or was it kind of switching off from everything else?
Go for it, Jess. You're the UFC fighter, not me. So.
Oh, the UFC fighter. It was crazy. Like, um, oh, for me, like it was just uh there was so much energy in the room and the crowd, like walking. You're right when you say it's like UFC fighter WWE, because like you come out and they have all the backdrop with you on it, and the crowd just went nuts. There was three tiers. Like looking out into that crowd was something else. So yeah, you feel like, okay, I'm ready to give it my all. I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. I have never seen something like that in powerlifting before.
Steve, an interesting thing. So I've competed in a lot of bodybuilding shows, and they are done at similar venues, right? But they have even less people in attendance than powerlifting meets. And that's not true. It's similar. It's basically, the families of people who are there, right? And other people who are not on at the moment. So I'm used to having this really weird kind of backstage pump up area, which is very different than a warm up room. You don't have Eleiko racks. You have like bands and roving dumbbells that disappear somehow. You do your pump up and you kind of go around this side stage area, and there's a very small kind of closed off curtained area. And then you go out there and you line up with the rest of the competitors. And that's a cramped experience when you're not, wearing a belt and there's not a table with someone, taking your attempt selection. So I was relatively used to it, and it did feel very cramped. What I was not used to was 1,000 people being in the audience instead of 100, So it didn't feel like coming out for a UFC event until you were out to me.
Right.
So it was like, oh, we're in like a weird banquet hall warming up. We go up some elevators. It's like a freight elevator, right? So it feels kind of industrial, like I'm working kitchen staff. And then we're hanging out in this relatively narrow hallway. And then there's the screen. And then right to the right of the screen, there's a stairwell that goes up, very short stairwell. And there's a closet-sized bathroom on the right. And on the left, there's this really brief, like I said, kind of curtained off staging area. And then there's the stage where you lift. So you could really basically only have 2 pairs of coach athletes hanging out in that area, maybe 3, if you were standing back. So you could only see the lifter immediately ahead of you, because if you were 2 back, there's just people standing in the way, and there's only a narrow curtain they're trying to keep closed. So it was challenging from a coach's perspective when you are actively trying to see what other people are lifting and potentially trying to gauge what their attempts might be. And like Jess mentioned, we were conferring with Garrett Bentley. I had him in my pocket in a WhatsApp group. There wasn't great Wi-Fi, or actually we were not supposed to use the Wi-Fi because of the streaming, but there was not great reception. So I had like intermittent 3G. So it was a slightly stressful environment. But man, once you got out there, it was like being at a rock concert. It was wild.
Yeah. Well, just speaking from a fan, if you like, just being in the audience, like I've been from being a rugby fan, I've been to quite a lot of big rugby games, and I would put the atmosphere at Sheffield up with as a challenge cup final. It was, and it didn't stop because obviously for a rugby game only lasts 80 minutes. But that was about 4 or 5. I was knackered when I left. So yeah. But no, it was really good. And with obviously from that, the turnaround into Worlds, because Worlds isn't that far away. How was because usually you would have like a little bit of a breather after a competition. How was that kind of, well, from your point of view, Jess, in terms of right, getting prepped for it, but then from your point of view, Eric, in terms of, all right, okay, are we going straight into Worlds? Was there any downtime afterwards, or were you both kind of, right, let's move on to the next one, or could you sit back and think, oh wow, that was pretty cool what we did?
For me, I usually like to take maybe a week off or something, but this time around, I just knew there was such a short turnaround. I got in the gym the day I got back because it seems like no matter how long or short of time I take after a competition, the first few workouts back always feel like garbage anyway. So I just thought I'd get those out of the way quicker. So we just moved pretty much right back into programming. It was tough though because Canadian Nationals being 5 weeks before Sheffield and then Worlds only being 10 weeks after Sheffield. I felt like I would have liked more time to have more of a volume base because it's been almost 3 peaking cycles. So it's been tough to fit that in. I think my squat benefits the most from that kind of volume, and it was tough trying to it's been tough trying to peak that many times in such a short time frame.
Yeah. Is that heading into, I mean, I don't know whether you'll both know the answer actually, but is next year, is the calendar going to change a little bit? Because it does seem as though like there was quite a lot of, or the, nationals into Sheffield into Worlds is quite a lot. Is there any talk of that being changed? I don't know. Again, that was just a thought that came to my head.
It's a good question. I don't have any specific knowledge as to the potential change of the dates, but I do know there is huge talks of a bunch of changes to improve the Sheffield, as good as it was for next time, from the audience experience online to the competition itself. I'm pretty sure it's going to be at the same venue. That is the one thing that I have heard, because I think they got that contract for 2 years, assuming we didn't destroy anything or anything to void the contract, which I haven't heard anything about. But
was that in the competition or at the after party? I don't know. Didn't know which one you said.
Yeah.
I had to leave before the banquet, so I recuse myself of any and all responsibility of any damage that was done to the venue after the competition. But I did hear the banquet was a lot of fun. So yeah, I don't know, and I suspect that I can coax some information out of people at Malta in a few weeks. But yeah, I don't know if have you heard anything, Jess?
Well, Canadian Nationals, they're changing because they have always been in March, which is a tough time because usually the Arnold is in there, and then Sheffield. So they moved it to the fall, so there actually won't be a Canadian Nationals this fall until 2024. So that'll be much better that way. And then I don't know. And then I think Sheffield is supposed to be scheduled in February now, so it does give a little more time. So they are definitely taking that into account, which is nice.
And how has been, because obviously with the excitement of Sheffield, and then I think Worlds is actually, there's the most athletes at Worlds this year. I think that's right. Is there an extra little bit of excitement around this Worlds with, some people that weren't at Sheffield, some people going to Worlds? Is there an extra little bit of excitement from you both for this Worlds?
I'm really excited for this one, mostly because the top 3, actually maybe even top 5 in my weight class, the 76s, are all going to be fighting for our lives for those placing. It's that close. So I'm excited to see how that turns out. And I'm also super excited because it's in Malta, which is a place, it's like an awesome destination, not only for a competition, but for a holiday as well. Like it just looks gorgeous, and I would have never got the chance to go there, other than for Worlds. So I'm pumped.
Nice. Well, my mate's just come back from Malta, and he said it was very good as a holiday destination. I'm not sure about the powerlifting, but the holiday destination will be good. And with that, obviously, as well, you've said there that there's 4 or 5 lifters, all sort of challenging for those places, if you like. What's been the focus been around that? Because I know sometimes there can be a little bit of distraction with other people, especially now. I know I said there, used the example of it was like UFC or WWE. Everyone's got an invested interest in it. I know, especially for me, especially with the women's powerlifting, that was really competitive in terms of some of the battles. Or has the focus just been on like both of your jobs at hand and kind of going into there? Because I know sometimes you can always there can be that little bit of distraction when there's a lot of noise and excitement around competition, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes it's good to keep that focus. How have you kind of both found that?
Want me to start?
Yeah.
So there's a saying in track and field, which I ran in high school, where you don't run PRs looking behind you in the lane next to you. And I think philosophically, that is what people really do need to do in individual sport, especially. And it is ultimately about getting the most improvement out of yourself that you can. And there are ways, I think, to leverage your one's competitive nature or the lack thereof, depending on the athlete you're working with, to do that. The answer was very different when I was working with Bryce Lewis than it is for some other competitors who are, very excited and motivated by the competition versus finding it a distraction, for example. So I guess you could say, different courses for different horses, not to call powerlifters horses, but they rhyme. So that saying is okay. I think people are still trying to wrap their heads around just how competitive powerlifting is getting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially in the women's, it's leveling up very quickly, and it's a newer thing. So like in 2022, like for example, the 63 kilo class, the top 3 all finished on 505 and it was decided by body weight.
Mm.
In Jess's division, the top 2 finished on a world record of 585. Jess wins on body weight, but to do so, she has to pull the heaviest deadlift in women's history at that time. In the 57s, there's a 2.5 kilo spread between the top 3, and all 3 of those, 478, 480, and 480.5, were world records when those totals were set. And then at Sheffield, we saw 8 out of 12 lifters go above their weight class's world record when they finished their total, at least at the time what the world record was. So now we're going into worlds, and it's the biggest worlds we've seen with more people in every single division. And it's so competitive now in powerlifting that, for example, in the States, which is one of the most competitive countries, the NAPF, which is another regional North American Powerlifting Federation competition that kind of has like the expendables, if you will, from the team, like people who couldn't make nationals. Well, the expendables right now, who's on that team, includes Ray Williams, Mike Tuchscherer, and Tristan Naselrod. Like, these are people who could podium at Worlds, and they're going to NAPF. And until Bryce recently decided to pull out, him as well. So we're in this position now as we move forward that we might be seeing like world records set by American lifters at NAPF. And then that's what is being dealt with by some of the folks at IPF. So it's just across the board far more competitive. And I think now more than ever, it's important to be able to have an awareness of how competitive it is, yet the ability to stay focused on yourself so that it doesn't become a distraction or a negative positive influence. So I'll say that.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on that, Jess?
On the women's side, I think Sheffield was a big kind of eye opener, and how fast the women's side is catching up to the men's. Because historically, there's always been more men who powerlift, but to see the women's side catching up to that is really exciting and honestly amazing to see.
Yeah, well, I think with that as well. So I am. Long story short, I actually changed coaching at a gym. I moved gyms last September, and in the previous club, I had a powerlifting club, just beginners wanting to get basically like a barbell club. Anyway, some came over to the new gym, and actually some of the women actually got tickets to Sheffield, and I was like, right, well, these are the ones you want to watch. So actually, there was some there, and the only funny thing about that was because since then. One woman who will be in the 76 kilo class is actually doing her first competition in August. So she was like, that sounds really cool, which, is from my point of view as a coach who coaches quite a lot of beginners is exciting to see, because, I want them to compete and go to competitions and see that, it is a good sport to be a part of. the only thing that I did say to them, I was like, as a first competition to watch Sheffield, not all powerlifting competitions are are like that. So when she goes to like a Yorkshire regional competition, it might not be the same from there. But I think that excitement around it is good, and good to see that you're both excited about that. In terms of and obviously you mentioned the deadlift. How was kind of that being managed compared with other lifts, and is there some targets that you have in mind with that? Because that's something that, like I say, as a fan, if you like, from watching, is something pretty cool to see those numbers being pulled. So how does that get managed in terms of your work schedule, Jess, and competitions coming up being so close together? How has that kind of been managed and putting a plan in place?
For me, it's kind of tough because I am fairly tall for a powerlifter. I'm 5 foot, pretty much 5'8", which, as far as low bar squatting, puts a lot of strain on my lower back. And then same with conventional deadlifting too. So it's kind of tough balancing that without burning out. Yeah, actually that's exactly what happened when I tweaked my back a little bit. It was just too much stress, I think, immediately after Sheffield. And then do I stand all day? So my hips and my quads always get super tight, and my lower back as well. What I can do for this world, because right now, like with the back tweak may have set me back a little bit for deadlifts. We'll see. I'm not sure yet. But squat and bench have been moving pretty well. So I am excited for that, and I'm just hoping my deadlift will kind of hold out at the same for now.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see. Only time will tell. We got just under 4 more weeks here.
Yeah.
Kind of crazy.
And from a coach's point of view, do you kind of take how Jess is feeling in terms of a body, or do you have like a couple of plan B's in the background? What's kind of like your take on that, Eric?
Yeah, so we definitely leverage RPE in our training a good bit, and Jess has a lot of experience with that, and she's very good at being honest with herself. So long as she's not out training with YouTube famous people or other big lifters and has a YOLO day, then she generally is on point. But in all seriousness, so like she mentioned, she has a very atypical schedule. And even as someone who did like his PhD in autoregulation, is all about that, and as a disciple of Mike T, it was a challenge for me to figure out, okay, how do we do this? And eventually we fell on okay, I need to think, if we have a 9-week period, this could be an 8-week or a 10-week block. So I need to have that flexibility built into my mind. I need to give her, RPEs. And when it comes time for the taper, I also need to think about how can we do this, with some wiggle room on either side of it. And that has been a really good experience for me as a coach to have that tool set. And early on, I was like figuring out how to do it. And I'd send Jess a message and be like, hey, like, what day did you complete? I was still a little like, how is this working? And then as we continued to communicate, we landed on something that worked really well. And so anyway, all that is to say that there is a fair amount of autoregulation built into the programming, both from the flexibility of the schedule, her ability to move exercises around. And then based upon what happens, we meet on a monthly basis, we talk on video. And if she's like, hey, this accessory combination with these days, let's swap it around. We change the structure based upon the most recent historical data and how she's feeling. And strategically, when you have a lifter like Jess, who is very good squatting, very good deadlifter, and like a good bencher as far as any standard, but compared to the field, that's her weakest lift. In my mind, I see it as we need to build her subtotal well without it taking away from the deadlift, and put her in a position where she can pull last. And that is going to be our biggest ticket to having a shot, right? So kind of making sure we keep pace on the subtotal is important. And I'm pleased to see that is occurring. Her squat has been, ticking up every single time she's competed. And she did 220 under challenging conditions at the Sheffield. And I think there's probably even a little more in there. So I'm pretty hopeful that we can put together a solid subtotal and then put her in a position where she's in reach of what her deadlift is. And I think she tapers well. And we're going to be in a spot where it is probably going to come down to the third pull unless there's far more mistakes than I would expect out of our competition. And we just got to make sure she's good for it. And in high pressure situations, she typically is. So I'm excited.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it as well. Unfortunately, I won't be in Malta, but I'll be watching from Leeds. But the one I don't know. Obviously, we've spoken through a lot there about how you've worked together as well, and talking about things and putting plans in place. But one question as well is especially in terms of the remote coaching side of things. Do you think that the regular communication and your communication has got better? Because probably this is more so from maybe when lifters are maybe looking for coaches or coaches doing online coaching with lifters. Do you think the video calls, the monthly check-ins and the communication that you both have is kind of key to that, to the understanding of it? And if that hadn't happened, if it was just a case of there's a program, I'll check in with you in a month, it wouldn't work like that. Do you think the communication has been key for you both to put the plans in place?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what ends up happening a lot of times is like Eric and Eric writes the program and then I'll do it, and then we kind of modify it based on if I can get all of it done or not. So it just ends up being like I try it and then I just let them know what's working, what's not working, and then we adjust it from there. So that part's been working really well.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and I think the quote unquote typical structure I have with lifters is like a weekly or bi-weekly check-in via email, and then a potentially calls when needed. And just based upon time zone differences, her schedule, preferred like platform for contact, like DMs versus emails, you kind of find the right combination of those things for the two of you. So I know that what works best for Jess and I is that if something does come up between our calls, DM is always available there. And, we both kind of, if she needs something, I know she'll hit me up, and, I tend to check on her every once in a while just to see how things are going. And then we also have a Google spreadsheet. So as she does it, I can see things going on, and, so it's live, if you will. And yeah, there's really nothing better than a video call, because you can get through all of the communication in a much more time efficient way that you could with messages or email. But you have the tone, the context, the immediate response, the facial expressions, hand stuff, all the other essential pieces of human communication. And those I think are pretty critical. I think our communication centers around those calls that we do. And I do want to give a shout out, to Garrett at both Sheffield and also for the Worlds prior to that. We've had kind of like a three-way call where we made sure we were all on the same page. And now in powerlifting, where typically a lifter has multiple people working with them, they might have, let's say they've got a coach who isn't actually savvy on the nutrition side of things. They might have a nutrition coach, they might have a programming coach, they might have a platform coach. And then if they're dealing with injuries, and which most lifters are at some point, they probably have, a physio or a physical therapist or some kind of doctor they're working with as well, who I think also deserves to be in that conversation. So you kind of feel like, the NASCAR that pulls off and you get the whole pit crew. And I think it's really important to have good communication between all of those people, or at the very least have a lifter who knows their job is to facilitate the communication and pass along those messages. And we have that, and I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah, definitely, and I think with that as well, that's why I said at the in the introduction, as a dream team, I think it is a collaborative approach, because I think, especially from seeing what Sheffield was like, it was kind of professional in all all but name, if that kind of makes sense. I don't know whether you both agree with that, because the amount of time and effort and nutrition and programming and recovery, there's a lot to be taken into account from there. Whereas if it was rugby players or footballers, for example, that's kind of a given. Whereas it's kind of that balance of, how do I balance this around work, or if I'm tired, or costs of getting to Malta, and all those sorts of things. Quite a few topics covered there, and a few tangents thrown in, but really appreciate you both taking the time to jump on. And the last question that I like to ask, and I think you'll be good at this now, Eric, after 3 times. But everything that we've chatted about, or powerlifting in general, or coaching, or competing, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom for everyone listening? Who's going to go first?
For sure. Do you want to go first, Jess?
No, you go.
All right, I will go. I'm going to harken back to my my track and field saying of you don't win a race by looking in the lane next to you. And I think you might think, oh, that only applies to folks in Jess's position who are in a 3-way battle with Gata Sitko and Carlina Tongotea, or all the other people I mentioned, those other weight classes. But I think, honestly, in the modern social media age, it really does apply to even the novice lifters more than anyone else, because you can get this very skewed perspective of what are the expectations, the standards, or the norms in powerlifting. Because there are so many people at an elite level now, it's not just that the overall field is raising and that everyone is stronger. It's, to put my scientist hat on for a second, we've still got a normal bell curve distribution. There's just more of them. So the mountain is higher, right? And the people who are going to get the most attention on social media, by the nature of being special individuals, are those who are in that kind of 5%. And now that's not 3 people, that's 30 people. So if you fill your feed with the most quote unquote motivating people out there, the people who are totaling 600 kilos at 76, and you feel like that's the norm, and a 500 kilo total at 76 is weak, that can really give you a skewed perspective. I mean, totaling 500 kilos at 76 means you're probably stronger than 98% of other powerlifters, in your weight class. And I think it can be very discouraging if it's not put in the right perspective when you first get into the sport. And being able to focus on incremental progress from where you are, and not diminishing your own accomplishments as you get stronger, which is really what powerlifting is about. It's about growth, progression, and your own ability to feel empowered and get stronger, and look back on where you were and like, wow, I'm blowing myself out of the water. So I've seen more and more people get discouraged, or never even step on the platform, or diminish their own accomplishments and improvements, because they are kind of in this self-imposed rat race based upon their feed. So my only advice would be to really focus on the active improving rather than the absolute number you're getting to. And if you do get to the point where you need to focus on the absolute number you're getting to, well, congratulations, you're vying for a national title, a provincial title, or a world title. And at that point, you can deal with it because you're a very high level lifter. But until then, just focus on improvement.
Nice. Some good take-home points there. Jess?
Main take-home point is that, like Eric was saying, with all of these people you see on social media, and you look at them and think, oh, I'll never get there. But strength, I mean, your strength in powerlifting is really a function of strength training over time. And for me, for example, when I started powerlifting, I've been 9 or 10 years ago already, I saw this video of Kimberly Walford deadlifting, I want to say about 530 pounds. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. At the time, I think I had just broken 365 pounds, maybe getting up towards 400. I looked at that and thought, that is so cool. I'm never going to be able to do that, but I'm sure as hell going to try to get there. And I wanted to be like her. I thought I was looking at how strong that was. I thought that was the coolest thing. And it took me, I think, about 5 years, but I finally did get there. And you'll never believe what you're actually capable. Um, because I don't know if I ever thought that I would be, I definitely thought I could deadlift 500 eventually, but I never thought I'd be getting close to the realm of 600. And that's my goal. Like that's my lifetime goal now. And I'm getting very close to it. I was only 22 pounds away in South Africa. And I think a big part of that is just been like really applying myself over the years and also enjoying the journey. I think a lot of people really focus on meets, and I mean that is what you do that as a powerlifter, but I think you just gotta keep pushing on, and you'll never things that you never believed you could.
Yeah. I think that was a good way to finish off everything we've chatted about today. I thought there was two really good words of wisdom there, and some take-home points. Thanks a lot for you both taking the time to jump on. Really, really enjoyed chatting with you both today. If anyone has any questions about what we've chatted about, see the content that you both put out there, where could people reach out to you or find you both?
On Instagram at Jessica Buettner, my name. And I think I got my email in there too. So if you have any longer questions, you could.
Nice.
Probably best place is 3dmusclejourney.com. That is where we've got kind of our one-stop shop for information for the drug-free lifting community. That's powerlifting and bodybuilding information for those interested. If you like stages more than you like platforms, we got you. Although, hey, with the Sheffield now, everyone's on the stage. So, but yeah, we've got a really great coaching staff that I'm a privileged to be a part of. Almost all of our coaches also do powerlifting coaching in addition to bodybuilding. And we've got a podcast where we cover powerlifting topics every third episode or so, something like that. And then, yeah, I try to post all the other stuff I do at Helms 3DMJ on my Instagram. Like when this one comes out, you'll probably find that on my feed. So, yeah, that's a great place, is in the comments of any kind of podcast or, like study or something I share, is ask a question in there if it's related to the topic. I will try to get back to you. If you hit me up with a DM and it goes to my requests, I can almost guarantee you I'll never respond to it because I get overwhelmed in there. But that's the best way to do it. Or drop us a question on 3dmusclejourney.com. We actually have an ask a question form, and then we try to address those in our YouTube lives or our every 10 episode Q&A podcasts.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thanks again. I know I've said that about 3 times now, but generally really appreciate you both taking the time to jump on. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.